There is a rational case to be made for love as a value, love as a driving force, love that has a really good brain, but is not ruled by it. Back. Oh my gosh, this is very strange. I'll tell you that. I used to whip off these podcasts with so much confidence. It's not that I don't have confidence today, but it's very different. Oh my gosh. It's been about 2 years, and I've been on a wild ride. I'm really excited to be back. I turned 50. I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to tell you a bit about what's coming. Thanks for being here. If you're listening, we probably have some connection somewhere, and that's really exciting to me. I love podcasts because they're so personal. It's like we're talking, but we're not, you know? I love listening to podcasts, certain ones. So, yeah, I turned 50 in June, and it could have been an utter disaster. I've written about my ketamine addiction, and I will link in the show notes. And the ketamine addiction really destroyed everything. And so some of the things were definitely always going to be true about my 50th birthday. I don't have children. I don't have a partner. But I also lost, through the addiction, many of my friends. And that was hard. And I also lost my work. I don't know which was harder. It doesn't really matter. And it needed to be lost. Like, I'm happy to talk about anything that I say here. I'm really happy to talk about. I do well with questions, especially about things in my life. I'm not always sure what's worth sharing. And there's so many different diverse people who listen to this podcast. We've met in so many different ways. So there's no sense of like, I don't do ideal audience, let's just say. I mean, I have a sense of some of the demographics, but we don't need to be pinned down to things. This is one of my central points. And I'm not going to pin myself into something. This is something core to where I am right now. I'm not in finance. I'm not in psychotherapy. I'm a human being. I'm not left. I'm not right. I'm a human being. Human being, first, foremost. So I'm heading into my 5th, and all the areas in life are feeling lacking. And I'm embarrassed even saying this to you because there is no flex in this. But it gave me the most precious opportunity. And the opportunity was this. There's only a couple ways you can go through that. You can hate on yourself, continue to rail against life, and suffer. Or I could say, actually, this is who I am. Like, for myself. My life is worth living for me. The world may seem to be giving me 1,000 no's, and I feel that even as I say it. Worked hard. I've loved hard. I don't think I'm any worse a person than anyone else. And that thinking is really easy to get into because we have this toxic narrative of you manifest your life, or, you know, you earn what you're given. And yes, you do. And you can make really good decisions. And I didn't always make really good decisions, but I couldn't have done any better with what I had. And we don't earn it. We don't earn our children. We don't earn our spouses. We don't earn stable careers. I mean, we do, but we don't, because many people, and look at the job market right now, many very, very qualified people are looking for work. I think anyways, we will go on and on about the extractive and status-oriented nature of the culture on this podcast. But that's how I went into my 50th, and I made a decision in early May, and it carried me through, and I actually had a really beautiful birthday, really strong boundaries around my time and what I let in, and a lot of self-responsibility so that there was no blame. And I had a really beautiful birthday. And I'm really grateful for the healing I'm experiencing from the addiction. I don't think about ketamine anymore. I'm so grateful. It hijacked my brain entirely. I warn everybody about the dangers of uncontrolled use of drugs. And I can say a lot more about all of that I will say a lot more about that over time, just not in this podcast, but questions, please bring them. So I came through that 50th birthday and I'm like, well, financially, I need to work. And what I will never do again is be engaged in the personal growth industry. I think that regulated professionals are good things, and I understand what I'm saying there. I'm talking about the system, quote unquote. But the system does do good things as well, because the alternative is a kind of renegade scenario that we have. And I'm not talking about policy right now. Maybe one day I will talk about policy, but I'm talking about where I can situate myself and the renegade nature of healing and psychedelic healing right now is such that there are some practitioners who work locally and underground. And when you find that good practitioner, you are a fortunate person, and that's good. But otherwise, you are responding to social media. And I'm going to do an episode next week on social media more in depth and my choices around it. But if someone is good at getting you the dopamine hit to make you feel like somehow they can understand you, help you connect to yourself, solve one of these problems in life, I'm going to throw it out there. They are not who I want holding space for me. They're not the person with the wisdom, because the wisdom really takes a quest. It takes fortitude. It takes offline time. And I saw what it took to have a sustainable business, and it was hard, and it was a lot of marketing. And then you're working with clients. It's not the dream, that's for sure. And it's not in integrity, ultimately, with a deep spiritual path. I think there are a few people that are exceptions to that, but the non-exceptions are way more than the exceptions. My teachers and mentors are people whose nervous systems are able to be offline, to sit, to suffer, and to allow the suffering. That's a big one. So I'm looking at financially, and I'm like, I need a job. And I thought I've come to, over the past couple years, be much more interested in finance, technology, and governance than I ever was, which is interesting because I spent 15 years in finance. But I think I've had the space, and the world is changing, and I came to be excited about it again for a variety of reasons that I will talk about. And I started to have some conversations with people in the business. I applied to some jobs and made my resume. I highly recommend that as practice. Super interesting to see the journey. But what I came up against a few things. But the first really big hurdle I came up against, outside of the confidence and the pluck it takes after a wild journey, 15 years finance, 9 years psychotherapy, 5 years psychedelics, addiction, to be like, oh, I want to do this again. I was just exploring my next chapter. But what I came up against was this paranoia. And I realize now this was about me, not about anybody else, because everybody else is going to have their thoughts and feelings, and that's fine. But I was up against a paranoia about two things in particular. One is my addiction, and the other is the article I wrote and some of the content I did around my summer as a Milf, Sexual Liberation for Collective Change. And I believe wholeheartedly in sex positivity. And I had a great time doing that. And I think it's some of the best work I've ever done. I'm not there anymore, but that's okay. It was great work. And it got published in print in Sex and Psychedelics magazine. It's very exciting. And the idea that a woman could be sex positive and also respected in the realms of technology, governance, and money, I could feel that in my body. I'm like, no asset management firm is going to Google me and hire me. And I definitely cleaned up my online profile. And some of it's still not up and some of it is. But I was really grappling with this. And it accessed the self-hate parts of myself. And I was angry at the universe because I felt so clear that this is what I was supposed to do, this article. And then I'm like, this undermines me forever. Between working with psychedelics, having an addiction, and being sex positive, I felt like it undermined me for everything. Everything in the patriarchy's world. And I don't think I'm entirely wrong. I was working in politics, and a couple people suggested to me running, and I knew there was no way. But I've also been on this process. It's such a juicy process because I want to live in a world where people like me can be elected. I'm not corrupt. You could say I've made mistakes. I mean, I wish the addiction didn't happen. But other than that, are they mistakes? No, they're not. And we live in a world where so many terrible things are being done. I'm adding a little post-production note here to say that while I continue to work through the shame of my addiction, I do not think that addiction is shameful. It is a disease. Nobody sets out to destroy their lives, their bodies, to hurt the people who love them. It is a devastating disease with great misunderstandings and stigma, and I want to be really clear that I do not see addiction as a mistake. But we can't handle powerful, sexy women. I mean, it's just for sure. We're not there yet. I saw when I was working on the campaign in the spring, like how much nuclear family we had to be and support. We're just not there in any sense of traditional values, equality, anything like that. And why, even as I say this, like why the family has anything to do with politics in this day and age is just wild to me. In Canada, it's just wild to me. Like, go live your life. I'm totally in support. I would have done this nuclear family if it had been given to me. But that has nothing to do with politics. Why are you threatened by someone who doesn't have it? But kind of story of my life that I wanted it, and yet I evoke threat and people in all kinds of scenarios for having a lot of freedom and exercising my freedom. So I was really, really stressed out about these things. And then the addiction piece, I'm really glad I wrote it. I've seen changes in the dialogue since I wrote it, and I believe I've contributed to the dialogue on ketamine addiction. I was public about my work with psilocybin, which was never recreational for me. And it was those last 6 months, started to do the MDMA, then tried the ketamine outside of professional healing settings that got me in trouble. And I would be out of integrity to not say that publicly. I really believe that. And everybody has the right to their own privacy, but I know of more than one facilitator who isn't forthright about these things. And it undermines it if people who struggle with ketamine don't speak out, especially those who have a place in the psychedelic industry, not just facilitators, but a place in the psychedelic industry, then we're never going to be aware of the dangers. And of everything I've written, the ketamine articles got the most trolling, the most negative feedback. Not that negative feedback is the same thing as trolling, but it was really interesting. It bumped up against a lot of stuff. And to me, a story about an experience with a drug is not really something to argue with. And I found it really fascinating, the narratives that it came up against. I was told I didn't have evidence, I hadn't done the research. And I'm thinking, well, I have my experience. So we have a problem in the ketamine world, and we should all have our eyes on that. So I was really cut up about this stuff, feeling like I couldn't get a job, I couldn't do this. It was very, very difficult time. I'll also say that ketamine recovery is excruciating. I was suicidal for almost a year, a bit on and off, but still, which made me have to take care of myself. Number one. It was extremely difficult. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The shame is off the charts. The dopamine healing, like all the things, it's just awful. And so it was a very, very dark time. But as I started, once I turned 50 and I really felt hopeless, I had a cracking moment. It was in the basement. The AC was out, so I'm in our unfinished basement. And I had a kind of cracking moment where I realized it was like all the different parts of me started to land. And instead of, I think, like when I'm with a friend from finance, I'm more the finance person. When I'm with a person who understands inner work, I'm talking about the inner work. When I'm with a politics person, I'm talking about politics. But what I hadn't really done is hold myself together with all the parts. And it's challenging because my parts are disparate. They are diverse. There's a lot of parts and they're strong. And so to find people who can bridge all that. It's just very naturally, I am not all the parts. And yet the pain of trying to hide a part to get a job was killing me. And I started to feel all these parts landing for me. And I had this experience of like, oh yeah, I've been on a journey and I have my own voice. And that was really the moment. It's cascaded since then. I have my own voice. And I've always been aware of that, but never owned it. And so I started to see that my voice was non-negotiable. It has nothing to do with money. My financial well-being is my responsibility, and I'm working on it various ways. But my voice is separate from that. And that's something else you don't get when you're out there trying to make a living selling transformational services, which I feel sick about. I try to honor the version of myself that did it. I get it. I get it. And I was doing good work. And yes, I deserve to be paid for my work. And it's so out of integrity with who I am. I just tried to make it work because I thought it's what I was here to do. And now I recognize that it's different. And I don't know what it is, but it's different. But then as I've been thinking about bringing my voice, what also took me some time in all this is the world we're in. We don't need any more social media, any more content. I really felt that. And I am going to talk next week about what I'm actually doing and how I'm actually going to connect, because it's a thing right now. Words don't mean anything. We're in this hyper rational place where we only believe in what's rationally happening, even though, there's definitely some dialogue around spirituality. Really, we're supposed to believe the rational thing that is said, but it sends us into these trauma triggers. We're scared, or we're reactive, or we're addicted, but nothing really means anything. And people are just going around doing whatever they want. And that's getting more and more normalized, that you just do whatever you want. And you can't even tell it's real anymore. It's a weird thing to say, no, I'm going to come out and be a voice. But what I came to is there are a number of voices that I really rely on right now. I think that local connections are where it's at. I think that offline life is where it's at. And there's a place for this life too. There's a place for this life. I think books are where it's at. Much better thinking in books. If you start reading books more than online, it shows up online for what it is. It's really easy to get sucked into these rabbit holes. Really easy to get in a dopamine structure of the brain that isn't able to think correctly or deeply or to the capacity you're capable of. So what my voice is going to be is the voice of soul. I don't mean spirit. I don't mean any type of cosmology. I don't mean any authority. I mean the messy, in process, from the body, from dreams, from the unconscious, from contemporary psychoanalytic, relational, attachment lenses, existential, radical ethics, soul. I was listening to an interview with Madonna on Jay Shetty's podcast this week. I was so interested to see where she'd come to. And she was talking about AI, and she says, well, my only question is, do the people who are making it have soul? And I thought, that's right. Soul knows that we're all connected, because soul knows that it's not in control. We have conscious will, but there is so much that is beneath the surface, that is in the how we're communicating. My body is breathing and my heart is beating and my stomach is digesting while I'm talking to you. That's not conscious. And the soul perspective can give us a little more humility, perhaps a richer lens, unfolding truth together, slow thinking, processing, seeing. And at the same time, I'm going to come in on a daily frequency. And this is the challenge to myself, is that these lenses can stay up with what's going on for us and contribute. And it's important those of us who are cultivating presence and soul do speak. I want to be expanded. I want to grow. I want to be challenged. I don't believe that we are polarized. I mean, we are. But I believe in the humanity of all of us. And I'm not going to go to the most polarized person who triggers me the most and try to see the humanity. No, I'm probably honestly going to fight in some kind of nonviolent way. I'm going to stand up for myself, but I'm not talking about the most polarized. I'm talking about the people that I live with, the people that I see, and then the people who are a little bit different from me. And tangentially, I am looking to build understanding. I'm not looking to build an ideology. And there's a paradox in saying that, and there's always paradox, right? Because there are things I will stand up for, and there's things I believe. And I am politically active because I believe that we cannot step aside from that because it's all of us. And the action is important, even when it's messy, even when it's imperfect. And it kills me a little bit to be politically active, honestly, because it means I have to take a stand, and I don't agree with everything. But this is what we're called to do. We will not agree with each other on everything. That's in the most intimate relationships, and that's in the global. We will not, but we have to learn to work together. We have to. And this is the project. So a few things I'm going to be working on. One is a cross-discipline voice. What I mean by that is money, technology, politics, economics tend to attract certain demographics who work in them, who talk about them, who are interested, and not others. The thing is, they are absolutely crucial to our world. So I am going to talk about economic models for therapists. I'm going to talk about technology, for example, the blockchain. Many people associate that with crypto. For those of us who care about inner work, all the people I know in the inner work therapeutic world are very, very, very smart. And they've come to understand that they're smart through the work often because we privilege a certain kind of intelligence, but that's ridiculous. Every human being has the ability to understand how our world is put together. Maybe we're not going to be software engineers and code the next OpenAI, but that doesn't matter. We can still understand what is happening. We're also maybe not going to be building the next plane or car, but that doesn't matter. We can understand what's happening and be part of the conversation. And the other thing I notice a lot is we have been really indoctrinated with right-wing economics. And so people who I love, who are connected to land back and who care deeply about equality of all peoples will sound very activist, will say things like, well, the people who have money, they worked for it. They worked really hard for it. And it's like a split because we've been really indoctrinated that if we don't make it hard for poor people, they won't work. That free handouts are very bad. And in fact, I mean, this is wild to me from people who work for a living supporting other people. Homelessness is about systemic injustice and mental health, which is related. And we can talk about free handouts, but why is that our biggest fear? Why are we so scared of that when you have corporations who are taking from the planet, their employees, and us through their use of government? What corporation would be able to make the money they would make without the infrastructure, without the regulatory systems, without the payment system, all of the infrastructure that government makes possible, which we fund? I am all for making a ton of money if that's after costs. But the cost to these corporations has become so low because they are so powerful that the average person is left paying costs for that because we all know it's expensive to live. It's difficult to get a job. So, and I'm like critiquing myself in my head because I've never said this publicly before. Alison, you're being political. Well, if being political is speaking how I see it and understand it and wanting the best for all of us, then that's what it is. I don't know how that gets worked out, but I do know that more understanding and conversation about how corporations and government work is crucial, and how money moves is crucial, because I don't want anybody to agree with me, but I want everybody to understand. And if you hear things I'm saying and you say, but what about this? Then we have a good conversation. For our biggest worry in today's society to be free handouts and taking away from the rich who work so hard, I think we're not quite there in our thinking. And I could be totally wrong, but that's the privilege of all this. We don't have to get it right, but I don't believe I'm wrong on this. I believe that we're not taught to understand and think and be empowered to talk about these things, and we should be, and we have every right. And whenever I talk about economics with, say, someone in the liberal arts who claims to not know anything about money, and we're just curled up in an evening and I'm explaining it like super basic, and they ask a question, it's always like the best question. It's like, that is a very good question. And either I've never thought of it before and I'm like, oh my God, or so there are people who have worked on this for their lifetimes, and here's some of the. It's very important that we're all having these conversations, and we all can. And I'm going to go back to crypto for a second, because people have a very negative feeling about crypto often, and it's also associated with kind of like an alt-right QAnon. Don't get me wrong, there's problems. And I'm not sure where I stand on crypto, although crypto is a multifaceted thing, and there are many different products, including things like stable coins. There's lots of arguments for them. But anyway, put that to the side. Let's talk about blockchain for a second. Nation states are not a given. Nation states are problematic. And with increased globalization, there are all these alternatives to nation states and increased problems, and it's not looking so great. And so maybe miracles happen, and maybe we end up with one world leader who loves us all, and like maybe it all works out. But it doesn't look that good to me, and I think we need to look at alternatives, and the blockchain is a technological way of decentralizing. Because unless we lose the grid entirely, we're not going back to tribal societies. But what if we could govern in a decentralized way? This is what the blockchain is working on. I'm doing some really profound reading in philosophy and economics on this. And I want to bring that here to the inner work crowd and say, oh, look, what if there were technologies that didn't own us, that didn't surveil us, that didn't make decisions for us that we didn't ask for? What if there was more participation involved in government? So that's something I definitely want to talk about. I also want to talk about hope, and all of these economic models, technological models, these are about hope. And there are so many places for hope. A way of summarizing it would be to say, I'm going to go deep in finance, psychology, love, mysticism, governance, technology, and contemplative practice. Continually weaving these things together and asking questions that weave the lenses. How I'm going to do it is I'm going to be doing some type of publishing on Substack every day, Monday to Friday, and most likely the podcast as well, Monday to Friday, and they will overlap. On Substack, you will get an email once a week. So if you want to get daily emails, you have to go to the settings on my publication, AlisonCrossthwait.substack.com, and subscribe to the section that's Arrows for Life Daily. I believe that we can all have enough. And there are models for living and working that give us all enough. There's also inner work required collectively to give us all enough. There is a rational case to be made for love as a value, love as a driving force, love that has a really good brain, but is not ruled by it. The problems of our time are complex and heartbreaking and fear-inducing sometimes, often, and developing the inner capacity to withstand the confusion and the conflict is central to our collective healing. A reminder, we will not agree with each other. We should not expect to, but as within, so without. As above, so below. So the way that each of us steps through our days, our lives, creates the future. I do really well with questions. So email me, Alison at AlisonCrosthwait.com. Personal questions, thoughts. Let me know you're listening and let me know what you think. And I'm going to close with a little reading from Terence McKenna. Nature loves courage. You make the commitment and nature responds to that commitment by removing impossible instances. Dream the impossible dream and nature will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched it, the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done. By hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering that it is indeed a featherbed. As I have been dragged into this lesson and beginning to come out on the other side once again, I am holding our dear world and praying that we find a way to minimize suffering and come out on the other side focused on the things that matter most. Thank you for being here.